The councilman grabbed Danny Colebrook's wrist and smiled. "Relax, sweetheart. I just want a word." She had been doing nothing more remarkable than carrying a stack of year-end audit files toward the service elevator at 11:43 on a Tuesday night. The corridor on the hotel's lower level was quiet. The rest of the staff had gone home. Danny had stayed late again. She always stayed late. Because the numbers in one vendor's expense account had refused to balance, and unbalanced numbers kept her awake. The same way, a loose thread kept her fingers restless. Franklin Spear had apparently followed her from the lobby bar. She tried to step around him. He moved with her. His grip tightened. He had the easy confidence of a man who had never once been told no by anyone who could afford the consequences. "I've been watching you all night," he said. "You don't have to pretend." Danny had always been the kind of woman people overlooked. Medium height, soft in the places the world liked to call wrong, dark hair pulled back in the kind of bun that said, "I am not here to be looked at. I am here to work." She had spent years making herself small and quiet and invisible, and it had worked exactly as intended, right up until the moment Franklin Spear decided her invisibility was an invitation. She asked him once to let go. He laughed instead. What happened next? Took less than 4 seconds. She dropped the files. She shifted her weight to her back heel, the way her mother had drilled into her in a parking garage. More than a decade ago, she found the weak angle in his wrist. Joints only bend one direction. Her mother had said, "Find the direction they refuse," and she redirected his balance with everything she had. Franklin Spear, city councilman, member of 3 charitable foundations, and firm believer in his own untouchability, hit the marble corridor floor with a sound that echoed all the way to the elevator bank. The hotel corridor went very still. From the mezzanine level above, through the floor-to-ceiling tempered glass of the private members' lounge, one man watched without blinking. Alistair Quaid set his glass of single malt onto the table beside him and did not look away. A slow, quiet smile crossed his face, the kind he rarely allowed in company. "Interesting," he said to no one in particular. No one in that corridor understood that the most dangerous man in Chicago had just made a decision. The aftermath unfolded away. Aftermaths always do when someone powerful hits the ground, loudly, and in all directions at once. A night porter appeared from the laundry corridor, stared at the councilman on the floor, and immediately backed away. A couple returning from the hotel restaurant stopped at the far end of the hall, the woman gripping her husband's arm. 2 other guests who had been waiting for the elevator stood very still, phones already in hand, recording without quite deciding whether to. Spear pushed himself onto one elbow. His suit jacket had twisted sideways. His glass of Macallan had left a dark stain across the carpet runner. "She attacked me," he said before he had fully processed that he was on the ground. "You all saw it. She attacked me without any warning." Danny's breathing was quick but even. Her hands were steady, which surprised her, because the rest of her was not. "I asked you to let go. You broke my wrist." "I didn't break anything." She glanced at his hand briefly. "You'll want to ice it." "My attorneys are going to." "Sir." A hotel security officer had arrived from the lobby entrance, slightly out of breath. "What's happened here?" "She assaulted me. I want the police called immediately. Do you have any idea who I am?" The security officer looked at Danny, then at Spear, then at the broken glass on the floor, and did what hotel security officers always do when a powerful man is on the ground. He reached for his radio and tried to buy time. One of the filming guests finally lowered her phone. "He was following her," she said quietly. "I watched him follow her from the bar." Spear turned sharply. "That's a complete fabrication." "I have video." The corridor grew quieter in a different way. Upstairs, Alistair turned to the man standing 2 steps behind him. Saul was his longest-serving associate, a former accountant himself, the kind who knew which numbers to make disappear and which to leave visible for auditors who needed something to find. He had learned not to ask questions when Alistair's voice dropped to its quietest register, which it had just done. "I want every camera in this building pulled," Alistair said. "Every angle of that corridor. Every angle of the bar before it." Saul nodded once. "All of it." "All of it," Alistair stood, and her name. The woman. The one still standing. Saul stepped away without another word. In the years he had worked for Alistair Quaid, he had learned that the calmest instructions were almost always the most important ones. By the time police arrived, Danny was sitting on a luggage cart near the service elevator, because someone had insisted she sit down, and the luggage cart was the only available surface. Her files were scattered across 20 feet of corridor floor. She was staring at them. A responding officer crouched to her eye level. "Miss? Do you think those are considered damaged goods now?" Danny asked. "The quarterly reports." The officer blinked. "I'm sorry." They fell face down. Some of the pages are probably out of order. She looked at the furthest page, which had slid halfway under the luggage rack. The binding on the Q3 summary was already loose. The night porter, who had stayed, started smiling despite himself. "Ma'am," the officer said carefully, "you just defended yourself from a—" "I know." She finally looked up. "I know what I did. I'm fine. I'm just also worried about the Q3 summary." 3 hotel staff members within earshot found something urgent to look at in other directions, mostly to hide that they were laughing. It was the first moment the suffocating tension in the corridor cracked open, and everyone near it breathed a little easier. Upstairs, Alistair had been handed a tablet by Saul with a preliminary report. He read the name, Danny Colebrook, senior accountant, 6 years with the hotel, 3 commendations for accuracy in the annual audit, 1 formal complaint filed against her, by a vendor whose invoices she had refused to approve because the numbers were wrong, and who had later been found to be skimming from the kitchen supply budget. Alistair read that last line twice. She had noticed something that 2 department managers had missed for 11 months. He looked back through the glass at the corridor below, where Danny was now carefully collecting her scattered pages off the floor, despite 3 colleagues trying to stop her. "Tell me more about her," he said. Saul cleared his throat. "Quiet. Keeps to herself. Works late most nights. Staff likes her. She apparently remembered that the overnight dishwasher's mother was sick last winter and brought soup on 2 separate occasions." He paused. "She also relabeled the entire supply closet on the 4th floor because the previous system, and I'm quoting, made no logical sense. She did it on her own time." Alistair said nothing. "The councilman is already calling his attorney," Saul added. "I know. He has a city contract renewal next month. He'll use it." "I know that too." Alistair looked once more at the woman below, who had retrieved the last of her pages and was attempting to resort them by quarter with great concentration, as though the corridor around her contained nothing of particular interest. "What I want to know," he said, "is whether she has anyone in her corner." Saul checked his notes. "Not that I can find." Alistair picked up his glass, found it empty, and set it back down. "She does now." The hotel's general manager, Lois Farrand, arrived the following morning in a tailored blazer, and the expression of someone who had already rehearsed this conversation several times in the car. Danny was already at her desk. She had been there since 6. The Q3 files were resorted, restapled, and arranged by month. "Miss Colebrook." Lois closed the office door behind her. "I've been on the phone with corporate since 5 this morning." "I assumed you would be." Danny folded her hands on the desk. "Councilman Spear is a significant presence in this city. His relationship with this hotel has existed for 11 years, Danny said quietly. "I know. I've processed his expense accounts." A brief silence, Lois continued. The legal team is reviewing your actions. I defended myself after asking him to stop twice. That's your account of events. There's also video. Lois's jaw tightened slightly. The hotel's position must remain neutral until the review is complete. She slid an envelope across the desk. Effective today, you're placed on paid administrative leave. Danny looked at the envelope for a long moment. She did not open it. For how long? Until the matter is resolved. She nodded, picked up the envelope, set it back down. Who's going to reconcile the vendor invoices while I'm gone? The February cycle closes in 9 days. Lois stared at her. That's your concern right now. Someone has to flag the Brennan supply discrepancy. It's been sitting in queue since Thursday, and it's a $7,000 gap. She wrote something on a notepad and slid it across the desk. That's the file number. Whoever covers my desk needs to start there. Lois took the notepad. She looked at it, then at Danny, and for a moment something shifted behind her polished composure. Something that might have been shame if she had let it travel all the way to her face. She left without another word. That afternoon, Franklin Spear held a brief press availability on the steps of his law firm. He wore a fresh suit, an arm sling that the attending physician had suggested, and that everyone who had seen him walk unassisted that morning found theatrical, and an expression of profound civic injury. The culture of hostility toward guests at this establishment is deeply troubling, he said. I was attending a business dinner when I was violently confronted by a hotel employee. My legal team will pursue every available remedy. A reporter asked whether he had made physical contact with the employee first. He did not answer. Another asked whether there was video. He answered that question even less. Across the city, in a building whose address did not appear in any public registry, Alistair watched the press conference on mute. He had found, over the years, that muting powerful men who were lying made it considerably easier to read their faces. He turned to Saul. The corridor footage. Secured, encrypted copies in 3 separate locations. The bar footage shows him following her for 12 minutes before she left for the elevator. Saul paused. She didn't notice. She was reading on her phone. Alistair looked at the paused image of Spear, addressing the cameras with the particular ease of a man who had been believed by rooms full of people. For so long he had forgotten disbelief was an option. Get it all to the attorney, he said, and find out who at the hotel made the decision to suspend her. Already know, Saul said. Lois Farrand. Acting on instruction from the regional vice president, who received a call from Spear's office at 5:40 this morning. The room was quiet. How long? Alistair said. Has the Marquette been looking for a capital partner? Saul looked up slowly, since the renovation estimate came in last fall. Call the broker. Alistair stood and adjusted his cuff. Tell them I'm interested. The internal review meeting was held in the hotel's 3rd-floor conference room 5 days later. Corporate representatives on one side of the long table, hotel management on the other, 2 outside attorneys, and Danny Colebrook seated near the back wall, hands in her lap, having been told to attend but not to speak unless directly addressed. She had come in her good blazer, the dark blue one she kept for year-end presentations. It felt like the right call. Spear arrived 7 minutes late, with 2 attorneys and the comfortable manner of a man who had never once doubted that rooms rearranged themselves to accommodate him. The lead investigator dimmed the lights. The first corridor camera showed Danny leaving the lobby bar area at 11:31, carrying files, walking at a pace that suggested she was somewhere between focused and tired. The second camera showed Spear following her from the bar, 11 seconds later. The third, positioned above the corridor junction, showed 12 minutes of him tracking her path through 2 different service corridors, before she reached the elevator bank. The fourth showed everything else. Crystal clear, no ambiguity, the grip, her asking him to stop, him laughing, her acting. The room stayed silent for a long time after the footage ended. One of the corporate attorneys finally cleared his throat. Mr. Spear, the footage shows you following the employee for approximately 12 minutes before any physical contact occurred. Can you account for that? The attorney beside Spear leaned forward and whispered something. Spear said nothing. The recording also contains clear audio of the employee, requesting that you release her wrist. I'd like a recess, Spear said. The footage, the investigator said quietly, speaks for itself. The conference room door opened. Alistair Quaid entered with 3 members of his legal team, and a folder that had taken 4 days to prepare, and would take approximately 4 minutes to present. He did not announce himself. He did not need to. Every hotel executive in the room stood before he reached the head of the table, the way people stand when something in the air changes, and they are not entirely sure why. He acknowledged the room with a nod. I apologize for the interruption. He handed the folder to the regional vice president, who opened it and went the particular shade of pale that belongs exclusively to people who have just realized they are standing on the wrong side of something that cannot be undone. My firm completed acquisition of the Marquette this morning. All employment decisions made in the past 2 weeks are under immediate review. He looked around the room. Calm, unhurried, entirely certain. Every one of them. Complete silence. He let it stay complete for exactly as long as it needed to. Then his gaze moved, briefly, deliberately, to Danny Colebrook at the back of the room. She had gone very still. Her hands were folded in her lap. She was watching him the way a person watches something they cannot yet fully account for. He did not smile, but something in his expression shifted. One additional item, he said. Effective immediately, no employee of this hotel, or any property under my ownership, will face disciplinary action for protecting themselves from physical harm. That policy will be in writing before close of business today. Someone started clapping from the back of the room, a front desk clerk who had worked the hotel for 8 years, and had been asked to come in for the meeting without being told why. Then the concierge beside her, then the 2 housekeeping supervisors near the door. It moved through the room the way relief moves through a held breath, all at once, and with considerable force. Spear left through the side exit. His attorneys followed without making eye contact with anyone. That evening, Alistair asked to see her. Danny received the message through Saul and spent a long moment in the employee bathroom, deciding whether the blazer was still appropriate, before concluding that it was, and going up. His temporary office was on the 8th floor overlooking the lobby atrium. He was standing when she knocked. He gestured for her to sit. She sat. You don't have to look quite so formal, he said. I'm trying not to look nervous, she said honestly. How's that going? She thought about it, poorly. He almost smiled. He sat across from her. I've reviewed the footage, all of it. So has half the city, apparently. The complete footage, not the clip. He folded his hands. You acted with precision. You stopped the moment you were free. She looked at her hands. My mother would have been very annoyed if I hadn't. He paused. She taught you. Started when I was 15. She worked hotel security for 22 years. Danny glanced up briefly. She used to say the goal was never to hurt anyone, just to get home in one piece. He was quiet for a moment. She sounds like someone worth knowing. She passed 4 years ago. She said it simply, without asking for anything back. But yes, she was. He held the silence respectfully. The way people do when they understand that condolence means considerably less than presence. Then he opened the folder on the desk between them. I'm building a safety committee, he said, for every property under my ownership, Hotels, restaurants, event spaces. 17 locations. He slid the document toward her. I want you involved in redesigning the protocols. Danny looked at the folder, then at him. I'm an accountant. You also spent 6 years in this hotel noticing things 2 layers of management missed for nearly a year. He leaned back slightly, including a $7,000 supply discrepancy that was still sitting in queue when you were placed on leave. She blinked. You read the note. Loy handed it to the interim team. Something flickered across his expression. They found the discrepancy. The vendor has since been terminated. She absorbed this quietly. My concern, she said slowly, is that a safety committee without implementation structure is just a document that makes people feel better without changing anything. Tell me what implementation looks like. She looked at the folder again, at the training matrices, the incident reporting procedures, the flowcharts. Thorough, well-researched, still missing something she couldn't yet name until she closed it. She closed it. Every employee should have access to basic self-defense training, she said. Not combat, not anything designed to escalate. Just, she searched for it, the kind of thing that gets you home, how to break a grip, how to redirect someone's balance, how to create enough space to walk away. She met his eyes steadily. My mother used to say that people in service jobs are trained from day one to be pleasant. Nobody trains them to be safe. Alistair did not move. That's my condition, she said. If you want my involvement in this committee, every employee, every location, all 17 properties. She pressed her lips together, aware that she was making demands in a room where she had very little standing to do so, and doing it anyway. I'll work the policy side for nothing if I have to. But the training is not optional. He regarded her for a moment that went on, long enough that she had time to wonder if she had overstepped. Then he extended his hand across the desk. Done, he said. She stared at it, just like that. The training budget was already in the initial proposal. He held his hand steady. I was hoping you'd ask for it. She took his hand. You knew I'd make that the condition. You spent 6 years catching problems other people walked past. He released her hand. I had a reasonable suspicion about your priorities. For the first time since the corridor, she laughed without anything held behind it. No relief, no careful monitoring of how she sounded. Just a laugh. I'm still thinking about the Q3 reports, she admitted. Refiled, correctly ordered. By who? Saul. He was an accountant before he was anything else. Is the February vendor cycle? Closed. 7 business days early. He stood. You can verify it yourself Monday. That's very efficient. I hire efficient people. He walked her to the office door. Neither of them hurried. Before she stepped into the corridor, she turned back. Mr. Quaid. Alistair. She registered that, filed it somewhere careful. Thank you for all of it. He looked at her for a moment. Don't thank me for the policy. It should have existed before you needed it. The training program rolled out across all 17 properties over the following 3 months. Every new hire attended an orientation that covered incident reporting, escalation procedures, and 30 minutes of practical self-defense built around a single principle her mother had given her, and she now gave to everyone else. The goal is not to win. The goal is to get home. Danny led most of the first-round sessions herself. She always began the same way, standing in front of rooms full of servers and bartenders and housekeepers, and front desk staff who had spent their careers being trained to accommodate everyone except themselves. I'm not here because I'm brave, she always said. I'm here because someone spent years teaching me that getting home matters more than getting even. The rooms were always quiet after that. The kind of quiet that means people are actually listening. Franklin Spear did not pursue the civil action his attorneys had initially threatened. The full corridor footage had been submitted to the City Ethics Board. The inquiry into his conduct was ongoing. His contract renewal had been quietly tabled pending review. He appeared at no further press availabilities. Alistair attended Danny's training sessions when his schedule allowed, which was more frequently than his schedule technically permitted. He stood at the back of the room and did not interrupt. He asked questions after everyone else had left, and the questions were always good ones, specific, aimed at what wasn't working rather than what looked impressive on paper. The staff noticed. Staff always notices everything. The kitchen manager at the downtown location told the front desk team she was fairly certain the boss attended the trainings specifically to talk to Danny afterward. The front desk team said yes, they had all noticed that 3 weeks ago. The overnight concierge expressed mild surprise that it had taken anyone this long to say it out loud. Alistair and Danny appeared to be the last 2 people in any building to notice it themselves. Their conversations had grown longer, migrating naturally from policy updates to other things. Books they had read, the particular difficulty of working within systems that were not designed with you in mind, the strange mathematics of trust. She talked about her mother. He listened in the way that made her want to keep talking, which was unusual, because she had always preferred to save her words for things that needed counting. One November evening, after a late session at the River North property, he offered to drive her home. She said yes without deliberating too long, which felt like progress. The city was wet and lit. Neither of them spoke for the first several minutes, and the silence was comfortable in the way that silences only become comfortable when they no longer need to be filled. "Were you scared?" he asked finally, "that night in the corridor?" She looked out the window. Rain moved across the glass in long lateral lines. "Yes," she said, terrified. He glanced over at her. "You didn't look it. My mother used to say that fear is not your enemy. Letting it make your decisions is." She watched the city slide past. "I was terrified the entire time. I just didn't let fear vote." He was quiet for a long moment after that. "That belongs on the wall of every training room we run," he said. "I'll put it in the budget proposal. I'll approve it the same day. You're supposed to request 3 competing bids first. I'll waive the policy." She laughed. He kept his eyes on the road, but the corner of his mouth moved. 6 months after the night in the corridor, the Employee Safety Initiative at Quaid Properties was recognized by a regional hospitality association as a model program. Other hotel groups had begun adapting versions of it. A national trade publication ran a piece on the training philosophy. The quote they pulled for the headline was the one Danny used to close every session. The one her mother had given her, the one she had never expected anyone to write down. The goal was never to hurt anyone, just to get home. At the annual company gathering, held at the Marquette's event space, Danny stood near the tall windows and watched the room fill with people she had met in training sessions across the city. Servers and housekeepers and concierges and kitchen staff who had come from 17 different properties and were now talking to each other like people who shared something real, because they did. She thought about her mother, who had worked hotels for 22 years, and had never once been offered a training session that put her own safety first, who had driven her teenage daughter to a parking garage and said, with the matter-of-fact love that was entirely her style, "I'm going to show you something I hope you never need." She had needed it, and now it was reaching people her mother never would have met. Something warm and enormous moved through her chest. Alistair appeared beside her quietly. He stood for a moment watching the same room. "You're thinking about her," he said. She didn't ask how he knew. "I always do at things like this." He turned slightly. What would she say if she could see this? Danny considered it for a genuine moment. She'd say the soup at the buffet station was probably cold. She smiled at the window, and that the seating arrangement was inefficient. And then she'd find the most junior person in the room and spend an hour talking to them, because that's what she always did. A pause, and then later, privately, she'd tell me she was proud. He said nothing, but he stood a little closer. Then he took her hand, quietly, without production, the way he did most things. She looked down at their joined hands and then up at him. "There's something I've been meaning to say," he said. She waited. "You changed how I run things." His voice was even, but not without weight. Not the policy, not the paperwork, the reason behind it. He held her gaze. "I spent years building things meant to be safe. I didn't always stop to ask safe for whom." Her eyes grew warm. "You walked into a corridor alone at midnight and refused to disappear," he said. "You asked for broken plate coverage. You wrote a note about a vendor discrepancy on the same day someone tried to take your job away." He looked at her steadily, "And the first condition you named when someone offered you help was that it go to everyone else first." He shook his head quietly. "That is not a small thing, Danny." She squeezed his hand. "Alistair. You're about to make me cry at the celebration dinner for my own training program. I'll have Saul source additional napkins." She laughed. Fully, freely, without asking permission. Around them, the room continued its warmth. People who had come from different floors and different cities, and different encounters with the same fear, gathered now under something that felt, unmistakably, like being looked after. It had begun with a woman who dropped her files and refused to make herself smaller. It had grown into something neither of them had planned. Not the policy, not the training rooms, and certainly not the particular quiet that had settled between two people who had learned to trust each other through one honest conversation at a time. And somewhere inside all of it, almost without either of them noticing, it had become something else entirely. Not the kind that announces itself in grand gestures or lit corridors. The kind that takes your hand in a warm room full of people and simply means it.